Hey guys, welcome to my channel. It is Booktube prize time. So today is February 1st, although you will not be seeing this until April 1st. And I was just given my Booktube prize Octofinals assignment for fiction. And I am so pleased. So I was assigned the grouping E of fiction. I don't know why I said that's so weird, but I was assigned group E of fiction. I'll put it up here on the screen so you can see those all. I'm thrilled. This was one of the best case scenarios based on the different groupings. So I'm really excited about it. I have my Booktube Prize journal and I've already put in my Octofinals page and then a page for each of the books in my grouping. And excitingly, I do already own The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, which is in my grouping. So I saw that and I was thrilled. So this is definitely going to be the book I start with, but we'll talk about that, as we get into reading the books. But obviously that one was one I was already excited about, knew about, and so yeah, don't need to read up on that one. The Candy House by Jennifer Egan. That's a book that I definitely heard about. I know that she's the author of something about the Goon Squad. And so she's a pretty popular author. I have a audiobook of that through Libro FM's ARC program that I've had for quite a while. So I'm interested to see what that one is about. But I think that's going to be a good audiobook. And it's literary science fiction, so that's right up my alley. Excited about that one. Love Marriage by Monica Ali is a book that I heard about when people were doing Women's Prize predictions last year. And that one was really interesting to me. So that's like a family drama. That's right up my alley. I was already interested in this. I think I had read the synopsis back then. So that one I'm excited for. I have seen the cover of Lessons by Ian McEwan, but I don't know anything about it. Not something that I had heard of, but I'd heard of it, but not something that I was overly interested in. And I think, honestly, reading the synopsis, it's not something that I would pick up on my own, but that's part of the fun of this, is reading things that you might not normally read. That one is, that's a 500-page novel, though, so buckle up for that one. And then The English Understand Wool by Helen DeWitt. This is only 69 pages long. I don't think that's a typo. No idea what that's about, but it's 69 pages, so it'll read fast whether I like it or not. Seems to get decent reviews. And then the last one is Afterlives. I do not know how to pronounce that author's name, and I don't want to butcher it, so I'm not going to. The book will be up on the screen. This is one that when the list of preliminary books was given out, I read the synopsis and was sort of interested, but not enough. So this one, we'll see. It's only 288 pages, so it's also rather short. So when I saw German troops, I assumed that it was like World War II, which was why I think I was ultimately like, no. But this sounds like it's not. Like, it's set in another country that was dominated by colonial troops. So that one actually sounds quite interesting. So I've gone through and requested what I can from the library. I think the only one my library did not have in any capacity was the one about wool. And so I requested the ebook of that, because since that's so short, I'll just read it on ebook and be done with it. But I have requested Love Marriage, Afterlives, The Candy House, and Lessons. Lessons has a wait, so I'm second in line for that one. So that one, it may be a little while before I get to it, which is fine. I did see that my library's app has it in ebook and in audio, so I could go either way on those, and I haven't checked Scribd yet, so I should check that. But yes, all in all, I'm pretty pumped. So a good variety of settings and topics, and most of those I think I could potentially really enjoy. So this will be an interesting exercise. I think, like I said, I'm going to start with the marriage portrait since I already own it. So that is, you know, it's getting a book off my TBR, but it's also Booktube prize. And I have it right here, so I don't have to wait on it. And then I actually can start an audiobook. So I think I'm going to start the audiobook of The Candy House simultaneously. So I'll start that this afternoon when I go pick up my baby. Because I actually am going to finish the book that I'm currently reading, which is, I've got about 60% of left to read. So I'm going to finish the book I'm currently reading and then start the marriage portrait. But in the meantime, I'm going to start the audiobook of The Candy House. So yeah, I will talk to you once I have some thoughts on any of these books, and you'll see that whatever that first one I finish is will be up now. All right, so this just came in from my library. I asked my library to source the ebook of The English Understand Wool by Helen DeWitt, and I just got a notification by email that they had purchased it, and I refreshed the app a couple of times, and here it is. So this is a relatively short book. It's only 69 pages, and I'm gonna read it. So yeah, I read the synopsis and I marked it like when I was going through the I cannot say that word, preliminary list. This is one that I marked that I would want to read either way. So I was glad to see it on my my grouping. So I'm interested to see what this one is about. I have since completely forgotten the synopsis, and I don't like to read synopsises right before I go into a book, so I'm not going to. But I'm going to read this, and I will let you know what my thoughts are. Okay, so I'm like 17 pages into this 60-page book. And at first it's just like mundane details about her mom's like beliefs and life and things like that. And then all of a sudden we get this letter between her and it seems like a literary agent. Like she's writing something like about a memoir about her life. And the literary agent or whoever the other person is like giving her feedback. But like, in that letter, just an absolute bomb is dropped about like, sooner or later you're going to have to talk about X. And it went from like mundane to like, wait, what is happening here? So I'm intrigued. Yeah. I'm probably going to binge read this today, if we're being honest, because now I'm like, I need to know what is happening. So I read that in like a couple of hours, or like probably an hour total. What do I think of this one? Einstein. What do I think of this one? For such a short book, it did pack quite a punch. There were some plot twists that were quite shocking. And I thought that it had a lot to say about, like, it was interesting. Hold on, I'm going to set this down. It was interesting because I think there was a good commentary on, like, what is valuable. And I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it, being that it's only 63 pages, 69 pages. But kind of the way that you understand the character, and I will say she's quite cold, and that felt very intentional based on the way the book progresses or the story progresses. And I think that it was really interesting, like from the beginning, the kind of clinical nature with which she explains some of the things that are happening. So when we find out that she's actually reflecting on like her childhood or the days leading up to this kind of discovery that we find out about, it's very clinical and kind of like distanced. And then once you become aware of what's going on, it becomes even more clear that that's just the way this person is. And you kind of discover a little bit of why. And it's really, I don't know, it was very interesting. Do I think that this is a short story or a story? Because I really would consider this a short story. That will outrank some of these other 300, 400 page books? Probably not. I feel like we'll have to see how the others shake out. I think that this is a story that at the moment I find it could be really memorable, but only time will tell, because like I said, the main thing is this: the character is very cold and you are very much held at a distance, but there are some really like I said, shocking twists and turns and kind of hilarious revelations at the end of what this person, the nature of and the capabilities of this person. So I don't know. I really liked it. I sped through it and I couldn't put it down. So there is something to be said for that. So, you know, book one down and I'm quite pleased with it. Yeah, I will check in with you once I have picked up my next read. All right, my hair looks crazy because it needs to be washed. So I am starting with The Candy House by Jennifer Egan. I'm listening to the audiobook of this, and it's actually a full cast narration, which is interesting. So far, I don't have a lot of impressions of it, but I like that it's a full cast. I'm about 10% into the book, and I'm intrigued. So far, we've kind of learned that one of the characters is, and I don't know if is he the main character? I think maybe, yeah, I think he's the main character. He owns like a Facebook type company, a social media company that uses an algorithm that was developed by this like, I don't know if she's just like a theorist or something, but she basically came up with this algorithm about trust, and then it got sold or used by social media companies to create algorithms to like figure out what people trusted, and use that in different ways. And yeah, there's some conversations right off the bat about like the ethicalness of that and whether that's inherently good or bad and things like that. So so far very interesting. I am looking forward to seeing where this goes. All right, so I just got to work. There's somebody in the car next to me, so I feel weird about talking, but I just can't not. I've been listening to The Candy House on the way into work, and some things happened. So the first third of the book is just like different narratives about an interconnected kind of family. They're all connected in some way. All of them are pretty insufferable.
And I didn't really enjoy that part a whole lot. It's a lot of kind of choppy narratives, each told with different kind of like vibes. So that was a little hard to get into, especially I think on audiobook. And then after the break, so like the middle third so far, we're getting a traditional narrative, and it's told by one of two twins, and she's telling the story of their family. And it's really interesting, engaging. I care a lot about those characters and what happens to them. And there, some things happen in there. And when I say that I was driving and all of a sudden I was just like, what? And like full body chills. And then I was like, I literally had to pause the book, and I was just sitting here going, ah. It was comical, but also like, I'm in now. What's going to happen? What's going on? I need to know.
Okay, I have to say this now so that I don't forget it, but I have like 8% left of the audiobook, or like 30 minutes of the audiobook of Candy House. This reads like that scene in A Beautiful Mind where he's tacking up pictures and connecting them with string in that shed. Like, that's how this reads. And I'm gonna wait and see how the next 30 minutes of this audiobook go and whether or not it comes together. But at this present moment, I kind of hate it. I said it. What the hell did I just read? Like, I understand less about that book having finished it than I thought I knew going in, like, the first few chapters. Like, I'm assuming it has to do with, like, the interconnectedness of people, because, like I said, it's like this web 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon thing going on, A Beautiful Mind thing. It's got... I hated this book. I hope this is the bottom book, because I don't want to read worse books. But right now, this is number 6. This is trash. I do not... like, the writing of it was fine. There was no plot. It was just like a bunch of interconnected stories, essentially. But they made no sense. Like, they didn't make sense on their own. They made less sense as a collection of stories. Like, there were so many times I'm like, who the hell were these people? I was like, oh, well, that was like the middle son of this random family. And this person was the narrator of this random story. And it's like they were all connected in some way. But, like, for what purpose? That was... If somebody else feels like that book has a whole lot of meaning and impactful, like, you are smarter than me, because nothing. I got nothing. I genuinely do not know what I just read. Yeah, so points for full cast narrative. Good writing. No points for anything else. Like, it's literally a 2-star book, and I feel like that's being generous. Yeah. On to the next one. I feel like you're just getting the same angle every time. But you know, I am finally starting The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. And I say that I'm technically like 20 pages in, but I keep putting it down. Not like putting it down. I just was in the middle of a couple of other books, so I wanted to finish those first. Now, this is the only physical book I have on the go, and I am gonna just dig into it. Yeah, I'm excited about this one. And it's funny because there's a lot of videos right now at time of filming, going around about the Women's Prize long list predictions, about people's Women's Prize long list predictions. And this is obviously a heavy contender for that long list just because Maggie O'Farrell has won the Women's Prize before. There's this whole thing about publishers being able to submit additional books if one of their, like, for an author that has been shortlisted, I think. So very likely that we'll see this on the Women's Prize list as well. So I doubly feel like I need to get on this one because I do also try to read the entire shortlist for the Women's Prize. So it's always nice when I've read some of them beforehand. But yeah, this is going to be what I'm reading now. I will let you know once I've finished it. Good morning. I look a state this morning, but that's it. I am halfway through the marriage portrait, and as expected, I am absolutely loving this. Maggie O'Farrell is just a masterful writer. I have 2 other books of hers on my shelf, and now I'm like itching to read them. Yeah, I think I might be at exactly the halfway point on this, or at least very close. And like the character development, beautiful. The tension, the pacing, all so good. It is told in like alternating timelines. So we have kind of like the current day, so like leading up to when she dies. Like that's not a surprise because this is about a historical figure, and there's actually a historical note in the beginning that talks about the fact that she died under suspicious circumstances. So one of the timelines is like in the days leading up to her dying, and then the other timeline is about her life. So from childhood, I'm guessing like leading up to that time. So at some point the timeline will like come together. So we're kind of learning about her as a person, about her family connections, about this person that she is married to, and like the dynamics there. Sorry. So very interesting, loving this. And it's a fairly quick read, even though it's historical and literary fiction. It's quite a quick read. So I have faith that I will finish this in the next couple of days to week. And yeah, loving it. Well, I finished this, and again, I will say Maggie O'Farrell is a masterful writer. Every bit of this was page turning. Once I picked it back up, I never wanted to put it down, and I read probably the last half of it in maybe 2 or 3 days. I really enjoyed this. Enjoyed is an interesting word, to be honest, because there is quite a bit of violence and just not violence and abuse in this, and yeah, it's pretty heartbreaking. So this is the story of Lucrezia de Medici and her marriage to the Duke of Ferrara, and she was like 13 when they married, which is gross, but that is true to history. And then she died mysteriously when she was like 15 or 16. And the kind of theory is that she was poisoned or murdered by her husband, who went on to have 2 additional wives and still no heirs. So yeah, there's a lot of like menacing, violent things that happen in this book, and I think Maggie O'Farrell handles them really well. They're written in a way that's not like gratuitous. I will say like, this was 5 stars until the very, very end of it for me. And now it's probably like 4.5 stars. Yeah, there's just some things in this that, like, I don't want to give spoilers, so I don't know how to say this without giving spoilers, but like, there are some relationships in the book that are really beautiful and wholesome, and just like, you are so glad that they exist amongst all of this violence and just misogyny. And then there are things that happen that just sort of make you be like, does anyone really care about anyone? So that was disappointing, but I will say, I think this is so far in the front runners for being my favorite book from this grouping. So really, really enjoyed this. 4.5 stars. Hello from me. Looking exhausted. I wanted to check in and let you know that I started the audiobook of Lessons by Ian McEwan. This one I've seen the cover, but I wasn't interested in it. And I wasn't sure what to expect. So I'm basically going into this one blind. And the way that it's starting out is fairly interesting. So I think I assumed from the blurb that we were going to be like following this man in chronological order. We're not. It's a narrative that kind of skips around. So we are getting his perspective when he's older, his perspective when he has a kid, like a young kid, and his wife leaves, goes missing sort of situation. And then we're also getting flashbacks to like his boyhood. So it's pretty interesting. I am pleasantly surprised so far, but I'm only about 10% in, so I don't really know what's happening. We're really just kind of building character development. But yeah, that's where I am on Booktube prize reading. It is now near the end of February, so I need to get my butt in gear. Got my cat friend over here. Where are you going, Simon? All right. Yeah, so I was gonna go get the book from the library to like hold it up before I did this check-in, but I'm gonna do this check-in. Lessons by Ian McEwan. I could not care less. So it's like, it's I don't know how to explain it except to say that, like, I feel like if this was a story written by a woman about like a female character going through these same things, I might actually be interested. I still am not sure I would, because it is essentially a story about a man going through his life during just like all the things that have gone on in the last 60 years or so. I mean, I'm saying 60 years, but it was set previously. So like, he might be in his 60s. I don't think he's that old. Basically, but he's talking about, he's talking about like his parents and his wife's parents and their involvement with the White Rose Society and like Germany in World War II, along with kind of like the era of the Berlin Wall and like his interactions with like Checkpoint Charlie and going from one side to the other. Even though he's not German, he is British. And like, there's this whole thing about his like adolescence, and there is absolutely trigger warnings for grooming and for child like teacher-child relationship, and definitely like abuse of a minor. So that part is really hard to kind of get through, because the whole time you're thinking like, this boy is being abused, he's being groomed by this woman. And that's in the synopsis, so I don't feel like that's a spoiler to say that, but like, so you go through that whole thing, except it's from the eyes of this boy who's very much in denial about the fact that he is being abused. And so you're getting like, sorry, the power went out earlier, so the power might go out again. We have a lot of high winds right now. But yeah, so you're like in, it's like I just predicted it. Lovely. Anyways, so you're, I don't know what's happening. I think it came back on. I think it like blinked off and came back on. Okay, anyway, sorry for that interruption. So yeah, you're like inside the mind of a teenage boy, and like, I don't care. Like, I know it's probably pretty accurate to what it was like to be in the mind of a horny teenage boy, but I don't want to read about it. If I wasn't doing this for the Booktube prize, I would have DNF'd this book very, very early on, because I get no enjoyment out of this. And also, so, you know, beyond the whole, like, I don't like the perspective, it's textbooky. Like, he's talking about the White Rose Society, and instead of just being like giving you the context of like how that's connected to his life, instead he gives you like a detailed explanation of the White Rose Society, what it is, who the people were, how it all went down, things that you can get from a nonfiction book about the White Rose Society, which I've read. And like, to be fair, he does portray it accurately to what I've read in nonfiction books, but it doesn't need to be there. It's just heavy-handed and unnecessary. And I just feel like if Ian McEwan wanted to write a book about like what it was like to grow up in this era, then write a book about that, but you don't need to include all of the historical context in the detail of like a dictionary or an encyclopedia, I don't know why I said dictionary, of like an encyclopedia. It's a fiction book. Like, that stuff should just be there to add context and color. It does not need to be detailed so explicitly. So that is exhausting, because he's done that for a number of different historical events. The Cuban Missile Crisis was another one of those. And it's just, I don't care. So I think I'm about halfway through it, and it's painful. Like, I do not know how I'm only halfway through this book. And if I could and still actually understand the book, I would speed this up to like 3 times speed. But I have it at 2 times speed right now on audio, and that's as fast as I can get it without like it being incomprehensible. But I cannot wait to be done with this book. I'm still not done with this book. Part of the sorry, my brain is deep in women's prize land. Part of the Booktube prize judging is you can't DNF books. And if you've been around my channel long enough, you know that I am very pro DNFing books that you don't like, because life is too short to read books you aren't enjoying. I haven't been enjoying this book like at all. So like 50 pages into this, I knew that I was going to hate this. I mean, I was not interested in it in the least. Of my grouping, this is the one I was least interested in. It's a book by a white man, written about a white man, and nope. But now I'm at part 3, and when it was like part 3, I was like, are you shitting me? This book is not over, because nothing happens. This man is so boring, and like, he has the most boring complaints, and I want to throw this book across a room. I'm not going to, it's a library book, but like, in spirit, I'm throwing this book across the room. I hate this book so much. like the energy I had for the candy house and saying like, what did I just read? Was this a fever dream? Like, none of that made sense. Okay, take you back to those moments. Enter this monstrosity. This is the biggest book on my list, or in my grouping, and my God, was this boring and dry. I had a little chuckle at the end. I had the audiobook sped up to 2.5 times, which I rarely do, but I was just like, I need this to end. But at the end, the author is reading through his journals. Like, this is not a spoiler because I don't know how I can spoil this, because genuinely this is just a history dump. But he's reading back his own journals, and he says there was no obvious themes, no undercurrents he had not noticed at the time, nothing learned. A grand mass of detail was what he found, and events, conversations, even people that he could not remember. That's literally, this book is just info dumpy nonsense, like random conversations, random snippets about his history, huge info dumps about different periods in time. And it goes from like the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, it goes even further back than that, because we get like the history of the different parents. So like it goes all the way back to the Second World War, and then all the way up to present day. And like it brings in COVID, it brings in January 6th, it brings in like lockdowns and all of that. And it just was like, as soon as he said something about like the pandemic and lockdown, I was like, I'm effing done with this, because like I don't give a rip what this man's opinion is about COVID. And like genuinely, so much of this book felt like just like a poor, like the perspective of somebody who is like not well off, has made a lot of poor decisions in their life as a result of their own choices. Obviously, there are other factors in this book. There is the factor of him being abused as a child and like not realizing it, and that had a massive impact and snowball effect on his life. But like genuinely, so many of the things later in his life are his own doing and making and choosing, but yet he continues to act like the world is against him, and all of these things are like, it just was like, I don't know. I really genuinely can't put words to it, because it was just that, just boring and nonsensical, and it was just stream of consciousness and no thread tying it all together. I mean, there was a thread tying it all together, because like it's this man's life, but like I don't care. And I have never been so glad to be done with the book. Like I said before, I would have DNF'd this like 30 pages in. Like I knew from the beginning that I did not want to read this and was not going to enjoy it. So yeah, 2 stars. I might have given it 2.5 because like, I don't know, like there is some skill to the writing, but then he started talking about COVID and I was just like, we're done. So yeah, 2 stars. Moving on. Hello. So I am realizing that I never introed this book, which I am listening to the audiobook of. This is Love Marriage by Monica Ali, and this is a book that I actually had interest in prior to it being in my grouping, when a lot of people were predicting this for the Women's Prize last year, and I thought it sounded really interesting, so it's already on my radar. This is about a woman who is getting married, and her new mother-in-law is like a very like hippie, feminist, free spirit kind of person, but she, the main character, comes from a very conservative Indian family. And so like the book opens with them going to dinner with this mother-in-law, and she's very much concerned about, like, will her mom say something awkward? Will this woman offend her mother? Things like that. So that's kind of how it opens, and it's very much going to be just a family story about what's going on. So it's like a contemporary story about this woman's life from that point forward. So I've actually read about 75% of this, and I really, really, really like this. I started the audiobook on my way to Asheville, and then I continued it on the way back. So I listened to about 75% of it so far, and planning to listen to the rest of it probably tomorrow or the next day. So we'll be finishing this relatively soon. It's just really well written, but it's like this wonderful, like, messy family drama situation. So our main character's family there's a lot of like messy dynamics about her brother and her dad, and then like she is having a lot of doubts about this engagement, and then like we get this morsel about the fiance that like we're introduced to him as this like perfect example of a fiance, and then we get this morsel that I don't want to spoil for anybody, because I think that it adds a lot to the story when you find it out when you do. But from that point, things start to unfold very differently, and I really, really like this so far. I will say that between this one, Candy House, and Lessons, there's a particular plot point or like thing that a character in all of those books go through that like I genuinely have never read in a book, and now I've read 3 in this one grouping, and I feel like I never really cared to read about that particular topic. And now I've read 3 books that deal with it. So I think this one deals with it the best, especially after having suffered through Lessons, and seeing the way that Ian McEwan handles that particular thing. I'm sorry, I'm being very vague, but I genuinely don't want to spoil it for this book. And you may be able to figure it out because I can't remember what I said about that particular plot point in Lessons. But the way that it's dealt with in that book is just sort of like it's not dealt with in any way. And while the blame is put squarely in one area, like there's no real ownership by the main character of that particular thing. Whereas I really like the way that it is being handled and dealt with and really worked through in this. So yes, big fan of this one so far. Thank God. So we'll see how I feel about the ending. So I finished this today. I really like this. I think I would give it 4.5 stars. The ending was heartbreaking. And like heartbreaking and hopeful and just a mix of all kinds of things. There's a lot going on in here. A lot of family dynamics, a lot of relationship dynamics, dealing with a lot of hard topics and working through those. I really liked the focus on truly like healing and working through some of the trauma that goes on in this book, and just seeing the different characters and the way that they all work through their own traumas was really well done. So this is absolutely one of the higher rated books in my opinion in this grouping. So I am thrilled to finally have one I really enjoyed. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend this one, especially if you like family drama type things, messy novels, because it's definitely messy, but I really think that everything was handled really well in this, and I thought the characters were really rich. They were all very flawed. The main character, there were times I felt the main character was a little bit like annoying, and that she was just constantly second guessing herself, but also in a really real way that someone might do if they are, you know, brought up a certain way, and then suddenly all these things that they thought they knew about themselves and their family are changing, and so they're very much just questioning and second guessing everything. So I thought that was appropriate, even though sometimes I did find it a little bit annoying. But yeah, loved this. Would highly recommend the audiobook. It was a great audiobook. And yeah, on to the last Booktube prize book for this grouping. All right, we're on our last book of the Octofinals for the Booktube prize, Afterlives. Yeah, so I actually started this earlier this week, and I'm about 45 pages into this. So far, I like it. It's reading pretty quickly. Apparently, this also won the Nobel Prize for Literature, so there's that. I don't know a lot about it yet, but here we are. And I read the blurb and then promptly forgot about the blurb, and that's all I got. So yep, we're gonna read this one and I'll let you know what I think. Right now I'm hyped on sugar, FYI, because it's my birthday today, and I went and got my Starbucks and I got a venti, and it was too much sugar. I feel like my brain could float out of my head. So, fun fact about me, too much sugar makes me feel like an alien, so that was a poor choice. I have regrets. That's neither here nor there. I will let you know once I've read some more of this. And then this one, I haven't actually read that much more than the last time I talked to you. But I will say that the end of part 1 almost made me cry in public. So far this one is panning out to be a good one as well. I'm hoping it continues in that vein. I'm definitely interested and want to pick it up more than I initially did. And apparently it's a Nobel Prize for Literature winner. I think I might have said that before. But yeah, so hopefully I will get this done in the next probably week. I actually put sticky notes in there to try to get myself to read to the sticky notes to finish this in the next week, so that I have like a good buffer on when the actual vote tally is due. So there's that. I am still reading Afterlives, and I'm about a third of the way through it. What I'll say is that it's not like a compelling read. So there's nothing that's like has me wanting to know more this whole time. It's really well written, so like the writing is approachable, but also just good, solid writing. But it's bouncing between a lot of perspectives, and so I don't feel like genuinely invested in any of these stories at this point. So, you know, we'll see how the rest of it goes. It's still, by virtue of I'm a third of the way through and I don't hate it, it's still faring better than both Candy House and Lessons. So there's that. And here I am finally to tell you my thoughts on this one. My final book. There we go. I don't even know. This was very slow, meandering, and the beginning was a little bit confusing, and I eventually got to the point where one of the main characters, I think it's pronounced Hamza, I was really interested in his story, And none of the stuff in this book was I ever taught in school. So like the fact that Germany and Britain and Italy were like at war in Africa, trying to like claim these communities as their colonies, and like the fact that they used native Africans as their essentially frontline troops and to devastating consequences is not something that I was ever familiar with. So like that part of it was really eye-opening to read about, and I feel like I learned a lot of information from this book that I didn't know before. And I think this was, you know, the writing was beautiful, and like when I would sit down and read it, I could read quite a few pages at a time without feeling like it was dense or boring or anything like that. But like at the end of the book, I just sort of was left like, okay. Like that's sort of my reaction, is just okay. So I don't really feel any sort of way towards it. I definitely don't have the like passionate hatred that I had for Lessons and kind of for Candy House. But I also don't love this like I loved The Marriage Portrait or Love Marriage. So I don't know. I thought this was an interesting read, and I feel, you know, like I'm not disappointed I read it. And I think if I picked this up on my own outside of the Booktube prize, I would have read the whole thing. I wouldn't have DNF'd this because I think it was, you know, compelling. But yeah, I just sort of feel meh about it. So it's definitely like a 3.5-star read for me. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like, I don't know, the end of it where it sort of like wraps up this one storyline all in like a big chunky blocks was sort of what took it to like a kind of place for me. Like I was ready for it to be over at that point in the last like probably 12 pages. But like it's sprawling. It takes place across, you know, the lifetime of a person, and there's a lot going on, a lot of different cultures and relationships, and just yeah. So I think ultimately I enjoyed it, but it's not a book that I would like recommend, you know? So yeah, definitely solidly in the middle of the pack. I mean, I know what order these are gonna go in, but I'm also gonna like give it some time, and then I'll come back to you tomorrow and tell you how I ranked them all. So see you in the morning. All right, let's chat about my final ballot. So I've already submitted it, and we're gonna talk about what I ranked everything. So I'm gonna pull up a screen and we will get to ranking. All right, it is gonna come as absolutely no surprise to anyone that my number 6 book is Lessons by Ian McEwan. This book was probably 200 pages longer than it needed to be. It was info dumpy and just completely uninteresting. So like, I don't know, it just felt very whiny and self-pitying, and again, just like history book info dumpy. So absolutely, this is my bottom book. And I think if I remember correctly, well, let me look at my spreadsheet because it's the easiest way. Yeah, I gave this a 1.5 stars on Storygraph. So bottom book. Then In fifth place, The Candy House by Jennifer Egan. This one I was pretty disappointed in because I've heard so much good stuff about Jennifer Egan's book, The Goon Squad. And so I was expecting this to be really good. Oh, it's upside down. I was expecting this to be really good. So the writing was good, but it felt like a fever dream. Like, I, at no point in this book, had any idea where the story was going or what the point was. And by the end, I felt like I was supposed to, like, know the point, and I didn't. So either I'm not smart enough for a book like this, or it requires multiple reads through. Either way, I'm just not interested. It was not for me, and I gave this one 2 stars. So number 5. So then number 3 I don't have, but I'll put the picture of it over here. Was The English Understand Wool, and this was good. I liked it. I think ultimately I gave it 3.75 stars, which is a pretty decent rating. And it was 60 pages, and I felt like, compared to some of the other books that I ranked higher, even though it was well written and compelling and I read it in like a day, it was still just 60 pages and it couldn't stand up to a full-length novel. It did still beat out 2 full-length novels in my opinion, but there were other things I enjoyed more or got more out of than this book. So I thought it was interesting, and it did a lot of really fascinating things with like kind of nature versus nurture, and like people's perceptions of victims and stuff like that. So I definitely thought this one was interesting. 3.75 stars, but it does land in spot number 4. Then I have Afterlives, which I enjoyed, but also felt was kind of slow. So this one is, I feel like I learned a lot about a topic I had never heard of. And I did feel connected to the characters. But ultimately it just wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't as compelling and interesting as the next 2 books. So I feel like the funny thing is I gave this 3.5 stars, but I still felt like it had more to offer overall than The English Understand Wool. So I know that probably looks funny that like I gave the number 4 a higher rating than this one, but I just felt like when you compare it on the scale of like, do I recommend this book to somebody? I feel like I would recommend both of them, but I just think this is one that I would recommend more than The English Understand Wool, because English Understand Wool is just sort of like a short story. It felt sort of like a little bit of a throwaway, whereas this felt like literature. I don't know. I don't know what that says about me, but yeah, I liked this enough that it is in spot number 3. And then in spot number 2 is Love Marriage by Monica Ali. And I really enjoyed this. I listened to the audiobook and I thought the audiobook was fantastically done. This one is very much like a family drama saga situation. It deals with a lot of traumas. It deals with a lot of complex family dynamics and some topics that I think don't get explored a lot. Interestingly enough, there were 2 books in here that dealt with one of the trauma topics in this book, and I didn't love that one, that topic. So like that part I didn't really love about this or the other book, but I did feel like the main character in Love Marriage was somebody that I could really feel for. And just like the things that her family is going through were so big and complicated, and it just, I don't know, it had a lot to offer in terms of like a family drama. So if that's what you're looking for, and I typically like that kind of thing, then this is a good pick. So number 2 spot for this one, 4.5 stars. And then number 1, for me is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. The writing in this is just so beautiful. And it does one of my favorite things where at the beginning, you know what is going to happen, but then we are learning, we're like moving through the story back to that point. So like we go back to her childhood and we make our way up to the moment of her death. And that's, not a spoiler because this is an actual historical person that died. But yeah, so I really like that kind of literary device. And I love Maggie O'Farrell's writing. And even though I wasn't overly interested in this historical person, didn't know who she was, wasn't overly interested in her story, I still felt that the book was very compelling. And I really loved the bits about her childhood and then the way that she grew. I didn't give this a 5-star or even a 4.75 star because the end kind of pissed me off, to be honest. I didn't love how that was handled. But solid book. Gave it 4.5 stars. And it is in my number 1 spot. So these are the 3 that I would like to see move on. Although if the English Understand Wool moves on, I wouldn't be sad about that. Just for me, it didn't hold up against the other books. But I would be absolutely pissed if Lessons moves on because that was trash. So there's my thoughts this morning. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. And by this point, the announcement has come out. I will not be judging the next round of the Booktube prize because, as you can probably tell by the fact that all of these have library shine, I didn't own any of these books except one. And I am really trying to make a dent in my physical TBR this year, and I bought a lot of books in March. So for the next 2 months, I'm going to be reading only books on my shelf and trying to get that number down. And also the month of May is going to be absolutely chaotic for me. So trying to manage the amount of stress I have by dropping something that I would be obligated to do. So I will be playing it by ear whether I judge future rounds, but I will likely judge at least one other round in this prize. So there is that. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me. I know this video was very long, so if you're still here, I would love you to drop me an emoji down below to tell me that you are still here and enjoy the video. And I will see you next time. Bye!